to Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Nye, and joining me for some extra brain power is Iram Ramzan. Iram, how the hell are you?
I'm taken aback that you said my name right.
I was going to go with Iram Ramzan, but I thought that might be a little bit too much.
Well, now that the all-party parliamentary group has given its definition of Islamophobia and Labour Party's adopted it as well, I think you're wise to not go down that route. Otherwise, can report you for Islamophobia now.
This is true. The line was always a bit blurred on the distinction between hate speech and criticism of Islam, and now it just seems like it's been...
Basically, if you criticise me,
that's it.
You are Islamophobic.
It's codified now, isn't it? Any criticism of the Ramzan, and it's straight to the gulag, I believe.
Pretty much.
Talking of gulags and non sequiturs, Andrew Doyle's revealed himself to be Titania McGrath. Are you aware of Titania McGrath?
Yes, I am. I must admit, I came a bit late to this this Twitter account. Most of our listeners will know who this person is, but it's basically a fake Twitter account that tries to poke fun at the whole snowflake culture, and now she/he has a book out about being woke.
Yes, Woke, a guide to social justice, apparently. So I'm a big fan of Andrew Doyle. I spent some time with him at the Battle of Ideas getting drunk, and then I went to see him live about a month or so ago in Salford, and we had a few drinks afterwards, and he actually told me that he was Titania McGrath and told me to keep it as a secret. And it sort of eating away at me. I thought, what am I going to do with this knowledge? And then luckily he's sort of outed himself now, so I don't have to sit on that or lie about it. But it's an absolute genius idea. It's like you say, it's a satirical Twitter account at Titania McGrath, and she just lampoons SJW rhetoric and ideology. And I mean, I'm just looking at the Twitter feed now, and there's one that says, anyone who has ever claimed that Jussie Smollett is guilty must now be prosecuted. Lying about hate crime can never be permitted in a civilised society. Another one. Facts are violence.
Facts are indeed violence. I was just having a look earlier on, and I think this one really made me chuckle. I've decided to come out as hey gender. This is when your gender fluctuates according to the pollen count. That makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and what's really good about this account is now that it's been revealed to be Andrew Doyle, he's getting a lot of praise and a lot of love for this, and I'm pleased to say that it's really resonating with people in the current climate of SJW madness, but it's also irritating a lot of people, and you can tell that the people that it's irritating are the exact people that this account is made to lambast. Really, isn't it? If you don't find it funny and you don't get it, and you think you feel slightly victimised by this account, it's because you are Titania McGrath deep down.
Yeah, I mean, I read there was a piece in the New Statesman and the Guardian by, of course, left-wing people who just don't think it's funny, and I thought, that's a surprise.
Yeah.
I wonder why you don't find it funny. Why is that?
It's great. I mean, it's taken off massively. I was on Ricky Gervais's show again last week, and Gervais brought it up. Gervais is a massive fan as well, so it seems to be like a lot of comedians and people in the industry are really kind of resonating with it as well, because one of the things that this sort of SJW outrage culture has done is really kind of throttled comedy in a way. A lot of comedians are quite scared about pushing boundaries now and stepping out of line, because, you know, they could lose that cushy job on Mock the Week or that Live at the Apollo gig over some tweet they sent 4 years ago or whatever. So they're kind of reining it back a bit, which is a shame, because I always sort of relied on comedy to find that line, that blurry line, and overstep it, and then perhaps teach us something about ourselves in the process.
Yeah, I know. I think that is supposed to be the point of comedy, but I think now even comedians are trying to be careful, and most comedians now are, you know, left-wing and kind of trying to be woke as well. And you just think the whole, you know, the one place where you don't expect any wokeness is comedy. You know, nothing really should be off limits. So I think this is what this account is trying to poke fun at, really. And sometimes it's hard to tell whether the statements that she makes are satire or not, because I think a few people were caught out by it.
Yes.
A couple of times. They just couldn't really tell that it was just a satirical account.
Poe's law. It's called. Nathan Poe coined the expression. So that's excellent. I can't recommend that enough. I'm working through the book as well at the same time. So this is what I've been begging for in comedy, something to come along and really kind of attack the overwhelmingly liberal left boundaries of what's acceptable in comedy, and this seems to be doing it. There seems to be an appetite for a bit of change now, which is good to see.
I'm slightly annoyed that Titania, whatever the hell, Tishania was outed, because I don't like knowing who the person is. I just want to just enjoy who the character is. It's the same with Modawa. A few people might be aware of the intersectional jihadi human rights Sharia campaigner Modawa, who was basically set up as a piss take of all these community leader types, and nobody knows who he or she is. And I think a few efforts were made to try and unmask this person, but I bet you know,
don't you? The silence says everything.
You've just manufactured that silence anyway. but I think that's what I don't. Sometimes it's just fun not knowing, and I think unmasking who Titania is just kind of taken away from it a little bit.
Titania, just like some cyborg version.
Is it Titania or Titania?
Titania.
Is it Titania? Why is it spelt with an I?
Can we just take a moment, after how many months of doing this together and you having to correct me on my pronunciation of all these brown-sounding names, I finally get to correct you on one?
I'm doing it deliberately because of all the times my name is not pronounced correctly, and here is a white, I'm assuming, non-cisgender person whose name I want to mispronounce. Okay, so fuck you.
Okay, fair. Let's just call it even. So yeah, I'd check out that. That's hilariously entertaining at the minute. I'm glad to see it blowing up. We covered on a previous episode, and I made a video on this issue before, Birmingham schools, and as we pointed out many occasions, Birmingham, place with a lot of people of the Islamic persuasion. Our Muslim friends reside there, quite a lot of them. We've been closely following the whole controversy and protests surrounding the No Outsiders programme. And that was the programme that would teach children about differences in relationships, differences in gender, different races, just so that people who identified in their minorities were not outsiders. They weren't ostracised, they weren't left out or face bullying. And that's basically what the No Outsiders programme is trying to do, isn't it? It's trying to tell children that there are non-conventional families that are quite prevalent within the UK.
Yeah. We did discuss this in our last podcast and the various issues that this programme had brought up. Basically, Parkfield Primary School in Birmingham was teaching the No Outsiders project. It was developed by the assistant head teacher Andrew Moffat in 2014, and as you pointed out, it's the aim of it was with the aim of educating children to accept differences in society, because we live in a very, very different country now to the one where we grew up, where there probably weren't as many differences, and it probably wasn't as acceptable to be openly gay, although maybe slightly veering towards that. But the program doesn't just teach about LGBT issues. It also teaches about race, religion, gender identity, disabilities, etc. And then it was running fine in the school for quite a few years, and then it just all of a sudden a few mums in Birmingham just took issue with it and decided to take their children out of the classes because they thought it was inappropriate. They said it was teaching children about same-sex couples, and that it wasn't. These lessons were not age appropriate. Ofsted came on the side of this school. and said it was actually age appropriate. And yet the school has said that it's not going to resume the lessons until some sort of resolution has been reached with these parents. And unfortunately, since then, several more schools in Birmingham, I think it's about 4 or 5, have stopped teaching this program now, following complaints by parents. So I think it was the Lee Trust, which runs 4 or 5 schools in Birmingham, said it was suspending the programme. They said they weren't going to look at it again until after Ramadan, which is, I think it's in May and ends in early June. So they're not
who
going
gives
to...
a shit?
That's Islamophobic. I'm reporting you to say the Warsi.
Well, can I just to if anyone's alarm bells are ringing by listening to this is entirely distinguishable from some of the batshit nonsense we see from sort of gender theory or feminist theory. It's not that kind of bollocks that's being taught in some over liberal American university or on campuses in the UK. This is basically, well, basically is the right word. It's incredibly basic stuff about relationships, just letting children know that they sometimes can be 2 dads or 2 mums, etc., and that there are some people that are non-white, and that's it. It's just teaching about differences and inclusion. It's not telling you to accept the fact that there are no biological differences between male and female, or that there's some patriarchy intent on keeping the woman down, and things like that. It's very basic, rudimentary stuff that no reasonably minded person should object to, in my opinion.
It's interesting that we're talking about this because today, which is the 27th, Parliament actually did vote on the bill, which would make it compulsory for primary schools to teach about relationships and sex. So, well, not sex as much, but it'd be teaching them relationship education and then relationships and sex education at secondary schools. So MPs voted on that today, and 21, I believe, voted against it. So the overwhelming majority voted in favour of it. So most people are actually in favour of this nationwide. It just seems to be these religious groups, and it's not just Muslims. Actually, it's Christian and Jewish groups have actually decided to group together now because they, I think, see secularism and liberalism as the common enemy. And they have this one thing in common, which is their really conservative, narrow-minded view around sex and relationships. And they see secularism as undermining that. So the whole nation has moved forward. It just seems that these few groups haven't. So I was in Birmingham last week, and there were protests being held outside Parkfield School and Anderton Park School, which is a few miles away. Now, Anderton Park does not teach the No Outsiders programme, and yet I think just because the head teacher has been reading some of the books recommended in that, parents weren't happy about that. They, maybe a handful of people decided to take it upon themselves to, push their agenda on the school, and they've been protesting outside the school, not just calling for the programme to go, even though they don't teach it there. They're calling on the head teacher to resign. So every day, a group of about 30 or 40 parents, some of whom don't even have children there, by the way, have been standing outside the school. One person has a megaphone and they've just been chanting all sorts of things. And, there are some people telling me that their children felt scared to walk past outside the school and on the road because they're just, they're really scared of these protesters. And they were handing out really, really inflammatory leaflets to parents, which had a lot of misinformation on it. There was one that these parents were handing out, and it just said the most ridiculous thing on it, saying they're teaching your child it's okay for them to marry their friend Abdul. Which I'm pretty sure it doesn't.
I'm just gonna say what everyone's thinking. Where the fuck is Owen Jones?
Well, he did send out a tweet.
Fuck off. A tweet? That'll do it.
Yeah.
You know what the problem is? Because it's not bankers protesting, he's not interested.
Oh yeah, that's right. If it was
homophobic bankers
that's it. If it was a bunch of middle-aged white men shouting puffs and all that outside of school, Stonewall would be out there right now.
That's true.
Owen Jones would be out there. And yeah, it's been left to these schools to defend themselves. It's been left to a few, small organisations to try and really calm the situation down. And yeah, all these main organisations, people like Owen Jones, hang on, where are they? Where exactly are they? But for some reason, it's acceptable when it's homophobia coming from brown people. And here's the funny thing: they're saying it's got nothing to do with religion, but our children are Muslims, and therefore it goes against their moral values. But it's not a religious issue. They're
making it to be a religious freedom issue. So
they're gaslighting LGBT people. This is what it is. It's gaslighting. Oh, it's not about religion, but it kind of is, but it's not. But it is.
Well, we'll have to see how that one unfolds. We'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure this won't be the last update we make on it. Before we started recording as well, I did tell people to contribute and send us questions under the hashtag TTMyth. We will definitely read them out. I know I always say that we'll read them out and then we never do. I will definitely read some out at the end of the show today. So if you want to get your opinion on the show, you want to ask us a question, do so by tweeting at any time under the hashtag TTMyth, and we will find it the next time we record, and we will probably ignore it, but we might deal with it. Who knows? It's like a little lottery, isn't it? Sort of like you at the airport, basically.
oh, that's actually true. Yeah, it really is.
Well, there's something that happened that was massive, and it's difficult to know how to approach it, given all the emotion involved and all the anger. So I'm going to try to be as sensible as possible, and that's the horrendous white supremacist terror attack in Christchurch, New Zealand. Now, as far as terror attacks go, doesn't really get a lot more worse than this one, does it?
No, it was really horrible. I mean, I woke up and someone sent me an email about it, and I thought, what are they talking about? And I checked the news, and I found out that in New Zealand, this absolute extremist went round to two mosques in the area and just started randomly shooting them. Not only shooting them, but live recording it.
Yeah.
50 people were killed. One died at the hospital, I think. And then 50 more were injured. He was arrested, charged with murder. And I think few people tried to claim that he wasn't being called a terrorist, even though the Prime Minister actually called it a terrorist attack. So no idea why they thought otherwise.
Well, there's two quick things I need to clarify here about this. And the first thing is, whenever there's an Islamic terror attack, the overwhelming number of times it is a suicide mission. So it's either martyrdom via a suicide vest, or it's somebody running around with knives until the police take them out because they're not coming quietly. So then when that happens, you can call that person a terrorist in the press all you like, because guess what? He's not suing you for defamation from the grave. He's not going to claim that he got an unfair trial from the grave, because he's not going to trial. So that's one reason sometimes the press is a little bit reluctant to accuse somebody of criminal activity.
People say this on the other side as well, like with the Westminster and the London Bridge attacks, and the BBC headline was, car mows into pedestrians.
Yeah, why aren't you calling him a terrorist? So there's two things going on. I mean, the far left are utterly convinced that whenever a white non-Muslim carries out a terror attack, nobody calls him a terrorist. Not true. Categorically not true. But the far right are absolutely convinced there's some conspiracy not to call Muslim terrorists and trying to excuse it away as mental health issues. They can't both be right about this. They can both be wrong. And I did release a little video on this, which we'll probably get onto later. So,
well, it's interesting that you say that because Concrete Milk, aka Damo, aka Concrete Racist, made a little video of this and talking about the linking of mental health issues and the labeling of terrorists as such. So I'd recommend
he made a video. He made a video.
Yeah. No, sorry. He wrote a blog.
He wrote a blog. Okay.
He wrote a blog. Did he write a blog or did he make a video? Oh, he's made a video, right?
He made a video. He made a fantastic video about Cage, which is well worth checking out. He's made a great video about the work Majid Nawaz does as well. But I think he's also wrote a spectacular blog post on this topic.
Okay, yeah. So he wrote a blog.
Fucking hell.
About
Iram
this.
Factless Ramzan.
Fuck you. Hey, I gave the fucker a shout out, right? That's good enough.
Yeah, but if you're not pointing to, I mean, make sure you check out Damo's Tapestry on mental illness and terrorism. And he also did a fine beatbox on the dangers of white supremacy. Check that out too.
Yeah. But you know, he actually put a phrase in there which I think sums everything up accurately. He said Twitter has become a quote-unquote frothing cesspool of horrendously stupid, deceitful, uninformed, tactless, obnoxious, and hypocritical takes.
The problem is, after something like this, people are not being objective. They're not trying to sincerely give analysis and report the facts to their audience. They tend to use these events as a springboard to score political points or score points against their opponents, people they don't like. And there's far too much of that, and it travels the world instantly. You know, thousands and thousands and thousands of retweets of demonstrable lies, bias and propaganda. And the corrections and the truth doesn't even come close to that amount of exposure. So, I mean, the first thing I want to say is, fuck anyone who makes excuses for Islamic terrorism, and I have been saying that for years. Fuck people who do that. As well, fuck people who make excuse for white supremacist terrorism. I've seen a little bit of that as well. I have a clear conscience on this. I can say this is unequivocally wrong. There is no excuses. It is ideologically motivated, and we need to sort out the root problem, which is white supremacy. And I say this about Islamism. Yeah, what I'm finding all of a sudden is people who have made excuses for Islam for years and years and the role it plays in Islamic terrorism suddenly understand the link between ideology and violence. Strangely.
Oh, I was just going to notice that. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when if it's an Islamist terrorist, they'll say, oh, well, you know, this man was just violent. Oh, he clearly had mental health issues. You know, he was just a hateful person. It's got nothing to do with ideology. It's got nothing to do with that. And now suddenly everyone's like, you know, we need to talk about the importance of ideology and what role that plays in radicalization.
Yeah.
And now they're spouting the conveyor belt theory, which they dismissed when it was about Islamist extremism, and that was about how, you know, for some analysts, the role of religious ideology is like a conveyor belt that, you know, pushes an individual into terrorism and radicalization. So once someone has adopted that sort of viewpoint or that worldview, terrorism is likely to follow soon after. And so that conveyor belt theory was seen as just, you know, it wasn't seen as credible. And yet when it comes to far right extremism or white supremacy, now suddenly everyone's like, oh, you know, we need to talk about ideology because this is what could happen again. And then also you have so many commentators there saying that you know, these kind of views that this extremist espoused, it's not just confined to the dark corners of the internet, but it's openly expressed in our media and politicians. And they were suggesting people like Douglas Murray or Boris Johnson,
Sam Harris,
blood on their
Richard
hands.
Dawkins.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to get into that. So I mean, the what I would say is, again, this is horrendous. This is a totally inexcusable act of terror and hate, and the panic, and just thinking about being there when it happened. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, and we can't spend 90 minutes just saying how horrible it is and just signalling to the world that we actually capable of empathy. I don't think that gets us anywhere. So the only thing we can really do is look at the fallout from it, look at the issues surrounding it, and respond to them in as a responsible manner as possible. And certainly the reaction and the misinformation and the finger pointing is a massive component of this. I mean, just to touch back on what we were talking about, ideology there. So people who have excused Islamism in the past will say, well, this is going to keep happening until we sort out our foreign policy. It's putting the onus on the victims to make a change. And on the opposite end of this as well, I'm seeing, well, white supremacist attacks like this are going to keep on happening until we sort out our immigration policy, which to me is just as bad. It's just as much of an excuse-making exercise in trying to get violent fascists off the hook as it is for people who point at Western foreign policy for Islamist terrorist attacks too.
I know. I think sometimes when these attacks happen, it's just best to focus on that for the time being, rather. And I know some people are saying, well, this is what happens when you have immigration. This is what happens with this and Islamism, blah blah blah. And you know, this guy, this shooter, he published some sort of manifesto that he called it. He labelled it the Great Replacement.
This is a white genocide myth, isn't it? White genocide conspiracy, should I say. There's quite a lot of proponents of this.
It is, yeah. So basically, it has a lot of anti-immigrant sentiments and, white supremacist rhetoric, etc. And in that way, he's no different to, say, other types of extremists, because extremist narratives are just so singular and they have a binary and totalitarian outlook.
They're not shy. They're not shy as well as about telling us why they're doing what they're doing. So when an Islamist does it, we ignore it and say, no, that's not what they really mean. When this white supremacist does it now, we take his manifesto at its word. I mean, the manifesto is a very strange thing, because it's not only it's quite clearly white supremacist. It's quite clearly inspired by that. There's no arguing about that. But there's also strange things littered throughout it as well. References to meme culture, references to Candace Owens, people like that. There's a lot of things that seem almost like they're designed solely to cause as much division as possible. And I think he even references that in his own manifesto. He is trying to create some sort of race war or some war between right and left. I mean, he blames Spyro the Dragon, a video game, at one point, and Fortnite. So I mean, he seems like he's poking everyone's buttons. People, gun nuts. People who blame video games. People who blame conservative commentators.
Justin Bieber.
I don't know. Justin Bieber. Fuck Justin Bieber.
But the thing is, this is the thing that extremists have in common. Their views appeal to people who want simple patterns in what is often like a really complex reality, and and it makes them feel like they're part of this really large group that's got a common purpose for something, and they see themselves as being attacked. Their identity is attacked. They're always going back to a glorious past as well, and then dreaming of a utopian future. Yeah. And the problem is these people, and you see this with Islamist extremism as well. They're always talking about the glorious days of the Caliphate or the days of the Prophet Muhammad, and how we should have an Islamic state that is just wonderful for us all to live in, because we're also oppressed because the world's attacking us. And these groups, they have that in common. But what I'm kind of worried about in a way is all this rhetoric that's been... I mean, I had to stay off Twitter for a while because it was just fucking disgusting. Yeah. It was a cesspit.
Yeah. I switched off for the weekend. I went to the cinema and went out, and I had some food and just completely forgot the internet existed for a little while, because cesspool is right. Yeah,
I just binged on Friends on TV because I just thought I don't want to know what people are saying, and then obviously they were discussing the definition of Islamophobia. So the all-party parliamentary group got the Labour Party to adopt their definition of Islamophobia. I don't know if you've seen the definition.
Yeah, you can't even look at the Quran funny. Basically, it's that you can't even say Islam in a sarcastic tone. No, I'm being facetious, obviously, but there is a lot in there that is ridiculous. The line has been really blurred between the criticism of the doctrine and criticism of Muslims as a people.
Yes, I agree with you. And I get it. And I get it that there is anti-Muslim bigotry out there, and it really, really needs to be challenged. It needs to be called out for what it is. But the APPG's definition that Islamophobia is rooted in racism is a type of racism that targets expression of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. I mean, what in the Gordon Bennett is that supposed to mean? I think from my understanding is the people who wrote that have taken the structure and the content of the working definition of anti-Semitism, and as David Tobe from the Quilliam Foundation pointed out, they've just taken that and they've just crossed out Jew and put Muslim in its place. So, for example, with anti-Semitism, the definition includes that denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination. That can be a form of anti-Semitism. And then the APPG has followed suit by defining Islamophobia as denying Muslim populations the right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of an independent Palestine or Kashmir is a terrorist endeavour. I'm sorry, but not really sure how that is Islamophobic. These are mostly political battles, not necessarily religious, although I know religion can play a part in it. A lot of anti-Muslim hatred is actually sectarian as well, and they've got rid of that within the definition. So what if Shias hate on Sunnis, or everyone starts hating on Ahmadis? What do we call that then? Yeah.
Okay, so let's park that issue for a moment, because we cover that extensively, and it's an ongoing thing, and I think that truly is the bigger issue. Because as we know, Islamic extremism is still the leading force of extremism globally as we speak, which doesn't excuse or allow us to play down terrorist incidents of a white supremacist nature. But my question is, I mean, for the longest time, I've been of the mind that people have been overblowing white supremacy. They've been seeing it where it doesn't exist. They've been throwing the term around everywhere to anyone and everything that might be slightly critical of Islamic ideology. But is it possible also, on one hand, that there is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy occurring where white supremacy of this nature, of an extremist nature, of a violent nature, is actually finding its feet again, is actually currently enjoying somewhat of a resurgence to the point where we should be more mindful of it?
Well, I mean, in the UK, for example, with the Prevent strategy, one of the government's counter-terrorism strategies, it's one strand of it, and under that they're getting a lot of referrals for the far right.
Yeah.
And I think we can't discount the threat of the far right and white supremacy. I know Islamist extremism and terrorism is a bigger threat, but and I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about that, but I think at the same time, we shouldn't dismiss far right or white supremacy because Islamism is a bigger threat, because the two kind of feed off of each other.
It's not hard to be critical of both, though, is it? I mean, I spend a lot of my time going for Islamism over white supremacy for two reasons. First reason is Islamism's more prevalent. It leaves more of a body count. It is the number one global source of terror. And secondly, whenever white supremacy rears its head everywhere, the entire world unites and comes for it and closes that shit down. I try to operate in the areas where I think these very important, consequential conversations that are not being had sensibly. I don't need to jump on the bandwagon about how bad white supremacy is, because we all fucking know, and it's one of them things that almost goes without saying. There's not a room I can walk in my life and espouse a white supremacist view without somebody giving me a slap. But Islamism passes as just a religious right. I mean, we've seen Islamism now outside schools, and that's hardly getting the attention it deserves.
No, I agree. I think in a way, some of that is downplayed somewhat. So with the the Birmingham schools thing, we saw the homophobia there being downplayed because it's Muslims who are doing it, and we can't attack them because they're mostly brown. So if we do, we're being racist. Whereas everyone is against white supremacy and the far right. But I think at the same time, white nationalism can be a threat to a lot of people, and not just say Muslims or brown people, but anyone who's deemed as the other. I can see what you mean by pointing out the hypocrisy there, but I still think any type of hatred and any type of bigotry, it needs to be called out.
Hatred is bad, Iram.
Yeah. No, I know.
It's bad, isn't it, that we even have to say, white supremacy is bad. How come you don't challenge white supremacy? Well, fucking hell.
Hey, I have to put up with white supremacy from you on a constant basis, right? So don't even go there.
I mean, I get called a white supremacist, and I mean, that's the worst kind of...
I get called an apologist. I get called an apologist as well. Like, somebody was accusing me of not condemning the New Zealand attack enough, and I thought, sorry, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to turn my Twitter page dark to look as though I'm in mourning or something? How much more do you want me to say?
I mean, I am the worst white supremacist ever. I mean, I hate identity politics, and racial identity politics are amongst the worst offenders. White supremacy is one of the worst offenders. My ideal nation is mixed race. I couldn't care less about mixed cultures and skin colours. It's ridiculous to think that we need a white nation. Those people are usually virgins dwelling in the mother's basement, watching Richard Spencer videos on YouTube. And yeah. That's punishment enough for them, I feel. But I do want to talk about some ethical head scratches, and it'd be nice to get your opinion on this. And I think you might have some good insight. So there's this idea now, and the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, I believe, she also espoused this view, and I have an opinion on it, but I also see the merit in what she's saying. She said she's not going to utter the terrorist name. She will not name this man. And other people have said the same, and other people have discouraged reading his manifesto or analysing it, because the argument is that only gives more power to his ideas. He's winning, basically. If we're talking about him and we're frisking his manifesto and analysing it and seeing exactly what's in it and what it relates to and the wider implications, we're doing his bidding, essentially. So where do you fall on this argument?
I can see where she's coming from, and I think after the horrendous attack that it makes people a little bit more sensitive to what's happened and maybe try to be more careful in their conduct. And she's Prime Minister, so I guess she's trying to lead by example, and she doesn't want to give him any publicity. I get that. But at the same time, I don't know what exactly that does. What would it really achieve? She doesn't have to say his name, but it's not going to stop the press from publishing his name. It's not going to stop people who want to know more about him by researching on him. And if we're not naming the problem, then we're just in denial then, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in knowing your enemy as well. And people talk about these manifestos in a way that they're almost some sort of magic spells that someone could just read it and all of a sudden they're a white supremacist.
But can I just point out, like, I've a lot of these companies like say Amazon were under fire for having, say, extremist books, like having even Breivik's manifesto or whatever the hell he published to buy, and yet you can buy Mein Kampf as well without any problem. So what is the issue here? A lot of people might want to buy it because they want to research it, not necessarily be inspired by it. So I just think we're going down a very, very dangerous road.
Yeah, and
here.
also the things that he's mentioned in his manifesto are sort of things that I like the Great Replacement. I wasn't entirely versed in this conspiracy theory, and now if I see it prop up if I by some random chance that I see it pop up somewhere, this is a serious talking point. I know what that is now, and I have some tools in my arsenal to rebut it or argue against it. Or I think sensible people should be able to look over these things and should be able to see what it's about, and should be able to discuss it without people accusing you of propagating his will, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but this happens every time there's some sort of attack or an incident. Everyone wants to shut down the debate. Oh, we can't say this, we can't do that, and it doesn't help. I don't think. I think, you know, as we've pointed out before, with social media now, a lot of people just get very hysterical and say, oh, well, you know, you retweeted so-and-so, you have blood on your hands. Oh, you know, Boris Johnson should be ashamed because he compared niqabi women to letterboxes. Oh, he has blood on his hands. And you just think, oh, for heaven's sake, you know, people are just micro-policing each other now for anything they say that could be deemed as offensive. And I just think that a lot of nuance is lost in all of this. Nobody wants to have a proper conversation about this anymore. They just want to rage. And I get it. What happened was absolutely horrifying. It really was horrible. But this is not the answer.
This isn't.
It really isn't.
If anything, this is not the time to lose your head. This, if anything, this is the time to really focus and be even more objective and more committed to open discussion and more committed to reasoned criticism. It's not. It's like you said something interesting before about, I can't remember how you phrased it. You said about people are very sensitive at the moment and reacting in quite adverse ways. And one of the examples I saw of this, it was almost panic. It came across to me as panic, and that was American Atheists, the big American organisation in America.
Oh yeah.
It was previously fronted by David Silverman, who would class himself as a firebrand atheist. He would just go for the jugular on all the topics, wouldn't pull his punches, wouldn't pull his punches on Islam either. Now, he was outed from that organisation after he was embroiled in some sexual harassment claim, a claim of which I don't know what the outcome is, whether it's still ongoing, whether there's legal aspects to it. I don't know. If anyone knows anything about that any more than what came out at the time, feel free to send it my way and I'll have a look. But what's happened is this organisation has taken on new management now, and I've noticed that a lot of their Facebook posts and a lot of their Twitter posts have become overwhelmingly close to social justice rhetoric of late. Absolutely.
Oh no.
And in the wake of this horrible attack in Christchurch, they took the opportunity to share a Huffington Post article, and they obviously included their own custom summary of some of the information in it, and they specifically pointed out the bits that accused Richard Dawkins of anti-Muslim sentiment and Sam Harris of anti-Muslim sentiment in the context of they have blood on their hands, as if they have created the climate of anti-Muslim hatred that leads to Christchurch, and they seem to be endorsing this message and asking, what can we do as atheists to reduce our culpability in these events? And I just thought, for an organisation to do that, to throw two founding members of New Atheism under the bus, two of the most mildest, objective, very clear thinking critics of not just Islam but all religion, just to panic and kind of, it almost feels like they think, oh, I don't want a finger pointed at me for this. How do we disassociate ourselves from this horrible act of terror? Now, to me, the way you deal with something like that is just to make sure you're even clearer in your language. You're even more committed to pointing out the difference between Islam and Muslims, and you're more razor sharp and focused in your criticism of one and more vocal about opposing bigotry against the other. The idea that we should now back off or refrain from criticising Islam or Islamic doctrine or Islamic extremism because there was a horrendous terror attack in New Zealand, to me, just sounds like a recipe for disaster. It only helps extremism of another stripe. Yeah,
but I think everyone's trying to just be so careful now in case they're accused of being bigots. And it's like in the aftermath of this terrorist attack, we saw New Zealand women, the Prime Minister and news anchor women wearing headscarves in solidarity. I mean, I get it. They're mourning and they want to show solidarity, and maybe that's their way of doing it. You know, maybe we can't be too harsh on them, but, you know, at the same time, I just think, why?
I was critical of this as well. Now, I am not saying these people are horrible people or they're intentionally promoting bad ideas. They're doing something that they feel comes from empathy. They think they're showing solidarity with the community at large, and I agree with that. People should do that. I think that's the right thing to do. My only point is there are better ways to do this than to promote, advertise, and normalise a symbol of global female oppression. You don't have to play dress up in order to say, no, we've got your back, you are part of our community, you are part of our country, and we will not tolerate violent attacks against you. You could have got the same message across with a placard saying, Muslims, we are with you, we are on your side, you are our brothers and sisters. That's exactly the message you want to be putting out there. You don't need to wear a conservative, misogynistic, patriarchal garment to do this. It makes no sense, and it spits in the face of all the women who are struggling and living under oppression, who don't have the choice to wear that garment just for a photo opportunity.
Yeah, have you noticed they only show solidarity by wearing a headscarf? They never show solidarity by wearing a mosque hat meant for men, or wearing a long robe that men wear, or grow beards in solidarity, although I know hipsters are kind of doing that. No, it always has to be wear a scarf to show solidarity.
And it's a conservative practice within Islam. Not all Muslim women wear the hijab. People who do wear it are conservative Muslims. So not only are we spitting in the face of people who are oppressed under this garment, we're also saying the most authentic version, the most Muslim-y thing, is the conservative version of it. How is that helping liberal Muslims as well? It's insane. The world's gone mad, Iram.
Well, you know, I'm just gonna quote the APPG's definition of Islamophobia at you again, which is, you know, you're attacking Muslimness, which is hijab. Yeah, but you know, there's a video that was shared on Twitter, and I'm hoping it's not real and it's a spoof, and it was supposed to be one of the mosque, you know, the New Zealand mosque's chairman in a crowd, and he's got a microphone, and he seemed to blame Zionists.
Yeah,
Mossad,
the Israeli intelligence agency, and yeah, it's authentic. It has been authenticated, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
I mean, I don't know why oh my goodness, anti-Semitism within Muslim communities. Whatever next, Iram?
I know.
Pies at a football game.
For fuck's sake, you know, people were on your side, right? They were with you, and then you went and you did that.
It's insane.
I mean, why does he think? I mean, the thing is, like, if it was Mossad, all they would have done was just rub the shoes while everyone was praying.
Yeah, maybe I should back up. Maybe I should back up and explain what's happening. So the video that I've seen, it's a very short clip. Now, it purports to show a chairman. He's been described as a chairman. He was described as a chairman of the mosque. So I don't know if that means the mosque which the massacre.
I think it's probably the mosque committee chairman. So usually at the mosque, it's the committee that's in charge. So maybe that's what he is. He's a chair of the committee.
Okay, so he's someone of influence within this Muslim community, and he's at a street rally where these people have gone up in the area to show solidarity with Muslims in the area. They've turned up with anti-fascist placards, anti-white supremacist placards. They're all there to oppose this horrendous terror attack, as they should. This chairman with a megaphone, which probably the first mistake somebody made, giving him a megaphone. He starts talking about, and the funny thing is, he says. And he says, and he's not afraid to say this. He actually says he's not afraid to say this, but he thinks that people are behind this, and he thinks it's Mossad. Now, Mossad is the Israeli intelligence service. It just means the Jews, basically. And even worse than that, somebody in the crowd shouts something like, "Yeah, fuck Israel," or something, and there's not one person in that entire crowd of so-called anti-fascists that says, hang on a minute, when did we go from showing solidarity to massacred innocent Muslims to propagating anti-Semitic conspiracy theories? It's insane how out of tune the mainstream left is with blatant anti-Semitism.
Yeah, but, you know, Muslim, so it's okay.
I'm not Jewish. in any way, shape or form, but if the Jews were capable of half the things they get blamed for, I would convert in a microsecond, because those guys, Iram, I mean, how is it possible to be the puppet master behind every Western government, every mainstream media channel, every terrorist attack? What else did they get blamed for? Stealing shoes, having all the money, and they somehow managed to do this. You know, they control all the governments, yet they somehow can't manage to get anti-Semitism out of governments or anti-Semitism out of media. So it's very strange to be in charge of everything, but seeing anti-Semitism growing, isn't it?
Yeah, I to be honest, I think it's all that challah bread that they eat. Maybe that's what gives them all this superpower.
Listen.
To both be victim and aggressor.
Mossad, if you're listening, hit me up. I'm coming over. Seriously, you guys are exceptional. If you're capable of half the things you're blamed for, really, we should all join the Jews. I don't even know why we're resisting.
Yeah, I'm actually skint right now, Mossad. So, please, can you do something?
Hit us up. It's insane how quick we get from. So something happens, a big event, an atrocity. We either get to very quickly, it was probably the Jews, or but what about the Jews? And I just find this very strange that...
Yeah, isn't it weird? Like, on the one hand, they complain that they're not victimized as much as the Jews, or they're not seen as big as victim as the Jews. Like, oh, nobody will say this about Jewish people. And then at the same time, oh, the Jews are behind this. So they're simultaneously presenting Jews as the victim and the aggressor. It's like they want to be, I've heard a lot of Islamists describe themselves as, they describe Muslims as the new Jews. Like, oh, look at the way Muslims are being treated. This is what happened with the Jews in Europe. And then at the same time, they're like, yeah, but Jews control everything as well. So you think, okay, so they control everything and yet somehow never managed to prevent their own genocide in Europe. Okay, but someone fucked up there. What's going on? You took your eye off the shoe.
Yeah.
You took your eye off the shoe. This is what happened.
Yeah, so this is horrendous. And I mean, not only have we had one of the most horrendous terror attacks in recent memory, but the hot takes have been some of the most atrocious, scatterbrained attempts ever. I just wish people would just fuck off at the minute. Is my take. That's my advice.
Yeah.
Hashtag fuck off.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. We do need a hashtag, actually. So if anyone's made it this far in the podcast and put up with my ranting, we do need something.
I think that should be it. I think the hashtag needs to be just shut the fuck up. Really, just STFU, because people are just commenting on this and they're just chatting a load of shit, or they're whipping up a frenzy, and it's not helpful at all. And instead, they just need to go away. They need to shut the fuck up. They need to go have like a nice cup of tea, cup of coffee, have a biscuit, have some challah bread, some hummus.
That's it. Hashtag have a biscuit. If you've enjoyed Taking the Myth this week and you've got this far, hashtag have a biscuit. Okay, I mean, we've just...
Oh, God, I want a biscuit right now.
We could talk about this topic and the atrocity at Christchurch all day. I mean, one episode or an hour of conversation doesn't do it justice. There's so much to talk about. So I'm sure we will revisit it at some point. But it might be a good time to maybe have a look at some of the questions people have sent us as promised.
Yes. Shall I read them out, Stephen? Right. So somebody has pointed us out to Mehdi Hasan's apology. It is Zwaldorf blank the Statler. So this guy said, do you believe this is genuine? And it's in reference to a apparent apology by Mehdi Hasan. So Mehdi, a couple of days ago, said... He started off a thread saying, since Mehdi Hasan, the journalist for Al Jazeera, started off a Twitter thread, and he said, since Christchurch, I've been writing a lot about bigoted and hate speech and demonisation, and the responsibility of journalists to get their rhetoric right. Words matter. I feel it's crucial at times like this to be self-critical too. So a tough thread for me. Drum roll, please.
Oh, you're not reading the entire thing, are you?
No, I'm not going to read it all. But basically, Mehdi, in a roundabout way, apologizes for things that he said years ago. When he was a lot younger, he was recorded on camera. I think he was at a mosque, and he referred to non-Muslims as cattle and kuffar, and said quite a few derogatory things about them.
He was ranting like an Islamic Hitler. You know when you see Hitler giving his big speeches, and it's fucking off the chain in terms of the rant value. It was like that. Fist clenched, subhanallah, every other word. He's fucking going for it.
He was like this kafar, subhanallah, Allah has done it. Sorry, wrong one. Okay, I got a bit carried away there. Okay, but basically, he was caught on camera, frothing at the mouth, and then he kind of apologised for it. He said, because words matter, deeds not words. And I was never one of those Muslim extremists turned reformers. Ugh. Okay. A little dig there, but okay, Mehdi. And then he says, I've written about me remarks before, and I've tried to explain them, but, I just want to say, this is 6 tweets in. I just want to say, I'm sorry. Is it too late, Stephen, to say I'm sorry?
Well, first thing is, it was an apology, but he took the opportunity to have a dig at some of his enemies and opponents.
Yeah, so that's pretty much. I was going to say that.
That's bad form. He also says that he wasn't one of these extremist termed reformers. Well, he is. If he's ranting about homosexuals and kuffars in mosques, and behaving like a ranty Islamic extremist, and now he's apologising for that. He has somewhat reformed his view on Islam. He has taken a more liberal interpretation. So he is a reformer in that sense. So it seems a bit unfair. I mean, my problem with Mehdi Hasan is fine. Okay, if he's going to apologise for that, I'll accept that now. And if I do mention them videos again in anything I produce or create, I'll point to the fact that he has publicly apologised. I did make a video the other day, actually, and I wasn't aware he'd apologised. Someone pointed it out to me afterwards. So that's fine. However, it's the things he says currently that I have a problem with. He's still a bad actor. He's still inflaming the situation. He's still obfuscating. He's still distracting from the main issues. I just made a video recently. I uploaded it to my YouTube channel, YouTube /G Spellchecker. Check it out. Hit subscribe or break your legs. He went on a MSNBC in America, a massive live news network, and he basically threw out the lie that if it's an Islamic terrorist, they're instantly designated a terrorist, whereas the word terrorist is never applied to white terrorist. Apparently, Muslim terrorists are never referred to as mentally ill. He made some glib comment that it's amazing to be Muslim because apparently we were immune from mental illness. And it's just not true. I put a video together of countless numbers of terror attacks carried out by a Muslim that have been dismissed under the Mental Health Act, or the person's been sent to a psychiatric ward rather than a prison, or the terror charges haven't been brought against them because they've been called mentally ill. This happens all the time. It's become somewhat of a meme amongst the far right. Oh, probably mental ill, because they see it as a conspiracy too. And I don't think that's true. I think if there's a mental health component, it should be recognised and it's noted. Same as with an ideological component.
It is, and that's why when people say, they never talked about it in this way. Well, the reason why these cases probably aren't as prominent is because there is a mental health element to it, and papers aren't going to splash their front pages with a person who's just been deemed mentally ill. It's not a terrorist attack. They didn't have a motive. They were just genuinely mentally ill, and that's why these stories probably aren't given as much coverage, because what else are they supposed to do? This person clearly had a lot of issues and they're not going to lead on that, so yeah.
Well, so to answer the guy's original question, do we feel that apology is genuine? I would have been willing to accept it on face value had his behaviour changed, and it hasn't. He's still muddying the water. He's still attacking people unfairly. He's still behaving in a quite unscrupulous manner. So there's nothing in there to tell me that he's changed really in his approach. I think he just, there's nothing in there to say that he's sort of a more redeemable character now. He's just a shithouse, but in a different way, if that makes sense.
And there's another question from Chris Falkenberg. It's been 5 minutes since Jussie Smollett and the Covington boys media hoaxes. Now we are back down the same route with Leaving Neverland and Michael Jackson. When did journalists stop doing research?
That's a great question, and there's a lot in there, unfortunately. So the first thing to pick up on, I suppose, is the Jussie Smollett. In short, fairly well-known actor, part of the TV series Empire, which I haven't seen. I think he also has a music career of some sorts. Was all over the news for being attacked in Chicago at 2 a.m. by two masked assailants who allegedly tied a noose around his neck, poured bleach on him, and shouted, "This is MAGA country," and threw out some racial and homophobic slurs. Jussie Smollett just so happens to be black and gay. Now, I didn't comment on this story at all because it seems so weird, and a lot of people were calling it a hoax straight away, and I thought that was a little unfair until we'd established all the facts. I mean, granted, didn't pass the sniff test. It was a bit suspicious. Did seem very dodgy on all fronts. And then it got even stranger. It was. I mean, I waited until the police made an official statement before I commented. And the official police statement, the Chicago police called a press conference and said this man had perpetrated his own attack. It was a hoax. He'd done it. He'd hired the two assailants, who happened to be two black Nigerian Americans, to attack him. He'd paid them off, and he did this because he wanted to generate public sympathy and increase his wage on the show Empire. Now, this looked really bad for Jussie. He was going to be charged under multiple accounts for this of criminal activity, and we just found out today that all charges were dropped, which is confusing. It's confusing because on the face of it, that makes you think, well, he's innocent. If they're dropping all charges, innocent. Turns out it's not as simple as that. They've just decided it doesn't seem, it's a non-violent crime because it's a hoax, and they don't think it's worth pursuing. And there's a lot of talk about his privilege in terms of how wealthy he is and how he's a famous actor, and an ordinary Joe would never have got away with this. I don't know what your thoughts are on the whole issue. I mean, I just want to quickly say as well, I've read an amazing book recently by a guy called Wilfred Riley. It's called Hate Crime Hoax, I think. It's about, I did not know this before. I mean, I was aware that it does happen, but I didn't realise how widespread it was. And that's people inventing hate crimes in order for attention or political goal or career goals or educational advantages and things like that. And it's massive. And a lot of the stories he details in his book, I didn't even realise they were hoaxes. I thought they were genuine instances of hate crime. Because what happens is, whenever there's an instance of hate crime, it's front page news, it's spread far and wide, people use it and run with it. When they find out it's a hoax, it doesn't get as widely reported on. It doesn't get the attention it deserves.
Yeah, it doesn't, because it doesn't, it doesn't fit a certain narrative, and this is what happened here. And this is why I also didn't want to comment on it. I thought, okay, I know it looks a certain way, but let's just wait and see what happens. And, we've kind of seen what has happened, and things like that really do not help people who they're genuine victims of racism.
Well, we saw this with Majid Nawaz. Jussie Smollett, the incident happened and people thought, well, this is dodgy, this is clearly a hoax. Then Majid Nawaz got punched in Soho and people were like, oh yeah, really? Because idiots assume because one thing's happened, it must then apply to all other things, which is pretty much the essence of prejudice. So yeah, it does muddy the water, and it does make it more difficult to address actual hate crimes, unfortunately. It
does. And then this tweeter also mentioned that he said, we're down the same route with Michael Jackson. I don't know if that means this person is I don't know if they think Michael Jackson was guilty of what he's been accused of, or
I don't think he does.
But basically, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a documentary, Leaving Neverland.
Documentary.
It features a story of two of Jackson's former child friends.
I thought he was going to say former lovers then, which would have been so inappropriate.
God, I actually feel nauseous now. I watched some of this, but I couldn't watch the rest of it because it was just so fucking graphic. Basically, these men discuss, the times when Jackson allegedly gave them jewelry in exchange for sexual favors, and said they'd go to jail for the rest of their lives if they spoke about it. And I mean, this is the first time we've heard of these allegations. They've been going around for like decades now.
Well, they've been to court.
Lawsuits were filed against him.
He was found not guilty.
They went to court and he's found not guilty, and they said under oath that he didn't abuse them, but now they're saying he did. I don't know if
I've seen both parts of that, and I can pretty much summarise my thoughts in a single sentence, and that is, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Michael Jackson was a paedophile. However, the evidence presented for that accusation is anecdotal at best and doesn't meet the bar required to make it fact that Michael Jackson was a paedophile. And I'm not a Michael Jackson fan, because I mean, come on, everyone likes Thriller, sure, but I've got no skin in the game here. If he's a paedophile, it's not gonna make any difference to me. I want whatever's true to be known, basically, and he's dead as well.
Well, I actually am. I am a fan. And so for me watching it was quite difficult, because I remember when the allegations came out, not the first time around, but when Martin Bashir, the journalist, made documentary Living with Michael Jackson in 2003. I remember that, and I remember thinking, oh God, he's being accused of all sorts, and this isn't right, because he makes great music, he can't be a paedophile. And it was very difficult to hear that as a fan.
Here's what I worry about, though, a little bit, because I try and approach things with evidence in mind and the burden of proof, and I apply that to as many things as I can. So the more extreme the claim, the more serious the claim or accusation, the stronger the evidence has to be in my mind. However, that's not always sufficient when approaching accusations of sexual abuse or assault, because it's very difficult to prove it sometimes. It's also very difficult to prove it decades later, and you don't want to be in a position where you're abandoning people who have been sexually abused and you're saying, I don't believe your evidence, you ain't got any evidence, I don't believe you. So you almost have to have a paradoxical mindset where if I were to meet them two lads and they were to tell me this story, I'd feel nothing but empathy for them, and I would support them. But at the same time, I have to fully accept and concede that they don't have any evidence.
But the thing is, now that these allegations have come to the surface again, I mean, BBC Radio decided not to play his music anymore.
So here's the problem.
What the fuck?
I think this is what this guy is getting at in his tweet. It's not necessarily that we can't talk about it or we can't have our suspicions or we can't think about it. I think it's the fact that people have seen this documentary and are now swallowing it wholesale and are saying as fact that Michael Jackson was a paedophile. And like I say, I mean, I saw Louis Theroux do it as well, and I thought Louis Theroux was a very objective kind of guy, and he tweeted out about it. And it just seems what was compelling in that story to me were the testimonies of them men. I found that I was hooked out. I felt, I went through a range of emotions with them. But what wasn't compelling was the evidence for me to say, well, it's a fact that Michael Jackson did those things. So I don't know what we're supposed to do about this. I don't know where we're supposed to come down on. And
well, you're supposed to just never ever play his music again. You're not supposed to listen to it again. And this also brings another question. Can you separate the art from the artist? And the controversies surrounding them, what makes one person more controversial than the other? Because there have been so many writers or painters throughout the past who have done such disgusting things, and yet they're celebrated for their work.
This is what fucks me off about
hardly anyone mentions them.
The Hollywood and the whole Me Too movement, but they'll all queue up to be in a film with Woody Allen or Roman Polanski. And it's just a case of, well, at least find some consistency in it. And it annoys me as well the fact that it would be easy for me, and it's horrible to say, it'd be easy for me if there was evidence, because I could point at Michael Jackson and go, there's the nonce. Good. We know. but we don't have the evidence, so I have to be honest about the situation. But that's not good enough for people. So if I'm not throwing Michael Jackson under the bus as a paedophile, I'm now a paedophile apologist. And this is a lot of the attitude we saw during the Me Too movement as well. Believe all women. No, don't believe all women. Believe the facts. Follow the evidence. Support women. You know, show some empathy. Be a fucking human being. But don't accept every claim as unalterable truth just on the face of it. That's anecdotal. It's not a logical way to get to the truth, unfortunately. And you have to keep that in mind, whilst also, knowing that you can support people and be empathetic at the same time.
One more question, and that is from The First Power / Chris. We'll go with Chris. Why can't agnostics admit they are weak atheists?
Well, I think he's getting confused about terms there, and it's not his fault. It's the popular way these terms are described, but we're all agnostic.
Is this like, you need to, shouldn't you all be either atheist or nothing in between?
Yeah, so he's got a good point. He's got a good point in the sense that a lot of fence sitters, I'll say, oh no, I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic, and they are fucking annoying. Yeah, they need to get off the fence, shit, or get off the potty, basically. But in the strictest literal sense, we're all agnostic atheists. You not all agnostic atheists, sorry, you're all agnostics. Agnosticism refers to knowledge. Atheism refers to what you believe. Agnosticism refers to what you know. So basically, we all don't know whether there's a God. We can't know. It's not possible to know. If you've been objective and scientific about this, it's not possible to know whether there's a God. We've got a pretty good idea. That's why I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God because I think it's highly likely that God doesn't exist. That makes me an agnostic atheist. That's a sensible position.
Pretty much, yeah. I think maybe there's an element of the term atheist as well. Because it's like the term feminist as well. A lot of women, younger women, say, "Oh, I'm not a feminist," because to them, a feminist behaves or thinks in a certain way, and they have a very negative idea of what feminism is. And maybe the same with atheist as well. So they see certain atheists who they see as maybe being divisive in their speech or something, and they think, okay, I don't want to be associated with atheism then because of that. So they say, oh well, then I'm agnostic. I'm not atheist. I'm not like these other atheists out there.
That's how it works. I'm not hedging my bets in the existence of God. I don't believe God exists, but I can't know for sure. I'm not going to claim to have ultimate knowledge. So I'm agnostic, but I'm an atheist, and that's the simplest way I can think to explain it. And it does get muddied a little bit when smug people think, I'm not religious, I'm not a non-believer, I'm far better than that, I'm an agnostic. And I hope there is a hell for them to go to, Iram, I have to say.
Oh, that's harsh.
Oh, I'm getting grumpy now. Getting grumpy. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before?
I think somebody needs a biscuit.
Yay! What was the hashtag? Was it have a biscuit?
Yay!
I think it was have a biscuit.
Have a biscuit.
So we'll look out for the one person who tweets that at us later. But this has been a pleasure.
Well, duh, I'm always a pleasure. Yes, it has. We've covered a lot today. I think we've ranted a while. I mean, we haven't frothed at the mouth like Mehdi or Hitler, but we've been. I'm in no way comparing Mehdi to Hitler, by the way. I'm just saying.
They've both got shit facial hair, haven't they? So I suppose it's.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you want to point people towards Sedar? Anything new bubbling there at the minute?
Yeah, we've had some pieces on the New Zealand attack. A little bit more about Islamism and hijab. Just check it out.
Sedar.org, isn't it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, it is. It's now you've just mansplained it for me instead.
I thought you weren't going to say the address for a second, and we always forget to pimp it out.
We pimped it good.
Sedar, SEDAA.org for a massive slice of sense on a lot of the political and cultural issues within the Islamosphere. I would say Islamosphere. Have I just coined that? Does that exist? Is that out there? You can have that. I want 5%.
I think it's more accurate to say Muslimosphere.
Iram, it's been a pleasure.
It has indeed. Until the next time.
What's your favourite biscuit? Think fast.
Oh, chocolate digestive. Oh.
I'm partial to a custard cream myself. Notice how I went for the white biscuit, you went for the brown one.
Oh, what a surprise.
A lot to read into there, isn't there?
Racist even with biscuits.
Racist even the biscuits, yeah. Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation, produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?